Hey there, and welcome to the Jeffrey Van Dyke Show, a podcast for paradigm changers. Each week I speak with another influential leader who's changing the conversation for their audience, their industry, and this world. I am so glad you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the show. This is Jeffrey Van Dyke. Today we have with us Reverend James Trapp. He is a model for using your personal story to affect change in this world and to really help other people. From a young age, he's known a lot of adversity. His mother left him and his family at a young age, and he was the oldest of 8 children. He went on to attend Princeton, eventually get his law degree, and he had a thriving law practice, a criminal defense practice in South Florida for a decade. Things caught up with him, though. His personal story caught up with him, and he got hooked up with drugs and alcohol and lost everything. That put him on his spiritual path at the halfway house, which led him to study and become a minister and eventually grow a thriving church in South Florida, after which he became CEO of Unity Worldwide. He is now the senior pastor at a church in Sacramento, California. Here's what I love about James. He is really down to earth, and his advice is very, very practical. He just knows how to go, yep, here's what I'm focusing on, and here's how I see this. And I certainly hope as you are listening to him and as you're learning from someone who has led a huge movement in this world, that you can take some of his lessons into the work you do as well. So thank you for being here, and let's welcome James.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. It's my honor. I'm glad to have an opportunity to share with you today.
Awesome. One of the things that's interesting to me for this conversation is that you've had a rich journey into your life's work. And your life's work, being a pastor, I know you've guided many, many, many people through their journey of answering their calling. And so I'm particularly interested in this conversation from kind of both sides of that journey for you. One of the things I look at in my work is how our core wounds are the training program for our life's purpose. That they send us on a particular path that at the time we can't see as purposeful at all. But in hindsight, we go, holy crap, I would have never ended up here without that. And you have a particular story around that. So I want to start there. Like, tell me about your childhood. Where were you raised? You know, how did life go for you as a kid? Where does it start for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. As I look back on my life, it has been an interesting journey. I was born in Long Island, New York, and I was a family of 4 brothers, 3 sisters. I was the oldest, so it comes with certain psychological things when you're the oldest of that many. But I think my journey really began when I was fairly young, maybe about 5 or 6 years old. I didn't know at the time how much of an impact a particular event would have had on my life.
Like from your life or from the whole
family? My mother
family?
disappeared from my life. And it was a situation where from the whole family just disappeared, as far as I knew. Remember, I'm only about 5 or 6 years old. I came home one day and she was not there. She didn't come back the next day, the day after. And after a while, I came to the realization that she probably would never be coming back. Now, you can imagine that when you're very young and one of the most important figures in your life ups and disappears from your life. And from my perspective, I was abandoned. I was left. And that, of course, had a very profound impact on my psyche, on my psychological makeup, my way of viewing myself. And I believe from that moment on, I felt that there was something wrong with me. Something was missing in my life. And from that moment on, not consciously, I was seeking to try to fill a void within me because of that event. And I didn't really recognize that till many, many years later when I was engaged in, therapy and things of that nature. So I sought to compensate for my lack of self-worth, really what it came down to, by achievement. How is it that I can do well? And primarily I turned to academics. That's something that I had some control over. So I did well through, elementary school, high school, and my family, my father and my stepmother eventually moved to Florida, and I ended up in Miami, and I ended up going to an inner city high school there. And despite that, I ended up going to an Ivy League school, Princeton University, which is, one would think that if you achieve that kind of success, that you would say, I have arrived. I'm a success. And of course, that didn't fulfill me. I mean, I went through the motions and did okay, attending to that university. And then I came out and I worked for a newspaper, pretty good job, but that didn't fulfill me. And when you're not fulfilled, you're always looking for something that'll give you that sense of satisfaction. And I looked for it outside of me. And so when you don't really know what to do, back in my day, if you know what to do once you finish college, you went to law school. So I ended up going to law school. I came back to Miami. And this was during the time, I don't know what your era is, but this is during the time of the cocaine cowboys in South Florida. And it was like, it was Miami Vice style living going on. And so I did a lot of criminal defense work, and I represented a number of, how should I say,
nefarious characters,
unlicensed pharmacists, to say the least. They were, yeah, and I got I made a pretty good amount of money for a young kid. I was still in my late 20s, probably around that time. But despite what appeared to be success on the outside, I still did not feel a sense of satisfaction, because what follows any kind of sense of satisfaction outside of you eventually does not sustain itself. And I found myself into dissatisfaction, and I ended up turning to drugs and alcohol.
What did that look like? What do you mean it collapsed?
Collapsed. It's like I jumped off of a cliff, and everything that I had achieved. Oh, cliff! I mean, like, I lost my house, my relationship. Friends would abandon me because I was addicted. I was addicted to a very strong drug. I think they call that free base. They would probably call it something else. They call it something of crack cocaine, era, during the era. And so despite all of that, my life, was in an absolute shambles. And this was really the beginning of my spiritual journey. But I first had to go to a drug rehabilitation center. And at the time, it was a place called Concept House. It was in a small, nondescript building in a part of town called Little Haiti, because it was an area where a lot of people from Haiti had lived. And while I was there, I had a roommate. And one of the things they would allow us to do while we were in that facility is go to a spiritual center on Sundays. And it was called Unity. And my roommate would go, and it was voluntary, and he said, yeah, you should go. It's really very, supportive of your, of the journey that we're on. And I said, well, is that a church? And he said, kind of, sort of. I said, man, I don't do church, because I did not relate to what I viewed.
What kind of church were you raised in?
I went to church when I was a kid. My family would, Well, I won't mostly Baptist churches, but it depended upon where we lived. That's where my family would go. If it was a Nazarene church, I went to that church. If it was a Methodist church, I went to that church. Because remember, we had a lot of kids in the family, so I think they used to drop us off in order to have some peace and quiet for a time on Sunday. They weren't particularly religious, as I recall, at that time. But I would hear a message, and I don't try to put down other message, but it didn't resonate with me, and so I never really got into it. Once I went to finish high school, I never went inside church again, and so he bugged me about going, and I said, well, if you don't bother me about this at all, I will go this one time just so you won't bother me about going to this place. And of course I did go, and I sat in the back near the door just in case something was said I didn't like. And I remember to this day that the speaker, Bill Cameron, gave a talk, and it was as if that talk was specifically for me. It was so specifically for me that I thought someone had given him my personal file, and he had used that as preparation for his talk. And although there was a bunch of other people there, it was really for me, because I had a great deal of guilt about what I had done to my life, the need to release that, forgiveness. And he was talking about how you can begin again, and so forth. And I was captivated, and needless to say, I went back on a regular basis, and that became the beginning of my journey.
Do you recall any taps on the shoulder before this to step into a spiritual path, to look at your wounds and address those? Like, were there taps on the shoulder before this that you were like, nope, keeping that door closed? Or was it like, no, I don't even recall having that?
Not directly when it came to a religious or spiritual path. I consider myself more of a spiritual person and not into any kind of dogmas. But one of the things that was always interesting, perhaps in the back of my mind, I had an interest in things that were beyond the normal secular way of seeing life. Because when I was in college,
Right.
they used to allow us to what they call audit a course, which means that you could take the course and take the exam, but if you didn't pass the exam, it wouldn't show up on your transcript. So you could just take anything, and if you didn't like it, you could drop out, or if you didn't do well, it wouldn't matter. So I used to take a few philosophy and religious, spiritual philosophy type courses there. And I was always intrigued by that because I guess I had this interest in philosophy. But I think getting my tapped into it, into this work, it really comes from my experience of trying to recognize my own self-worth, my own value. Because what I've learned along the way is that I did have a sense that I was not worthy. And it may have been part of that incident I had with the abandonment by my mother, and maybe other things I'm not even consciously aware of. And as a result of kind of healing that, it allows me to have a lot of empathy for other people. Because one of the things I've discovered in this work over the years, that there are a lot of people who on the outside are extremely successful, have everything that you can possibly imagine, but there's always something in there that says, I'm not good enough. And I recognize that. And that's a way that I can, kind of relate to people when, people do things that are bizarre. You never really know what they may have gone through in their life or what's going on within them at all. So I find that what I seek to do, and my personal mission, is really hopefully inspire people and also leaders to live their best selves so that they can make a positive contribution, to our world.
Yeah.
So that's really what my gift is, as a speaker and a motivator, hopefully to help people tap into something that will recognize that they have value. They don't have to be stuck in life. If they've fallen off, they can always begin again. You can begin anew. And that was probably one of the greatest lessons in my life because I was able to turn that around. And if somebody like me
You
can do
know,
it, then anyone can
I
do it.
love that you
So
share that because
I think my
I
experiences,
have
it's been very
seen
helpful in
time
the
and
work
time
I do.
again that our stories are perfect. You know, that the life we've lived has such perfection and the stories are so necessary for our work. And for your work, you know, you have this story that says, well, heck, if I can have redemption, if I can turn this around, like it's available. It's free of charge. Here you go. It's available. And I just love that, you know, Brene
Yes.
Brown always says, until you own your story owns you.
Yes.
Uh, and I love your example of owning your story and using it purposefully and
Yep. Yep.
consciously. So good. Uh, One of the things that I so often, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Reverend Trapp.
Yep. Yep. No, I was going to say that, I take a course, and part of the byline of that course is coming to the realization that nothing and no one is against you. We may think certain things that happen in our life are against us,
Yeah.
but if we look behind them, there's actually some benefit there
What do you
for
think
us
helps people
if
see
we
that?
if we if we're willing to find it. I always believe that it starts with them being able to see it
A
in someone
reflection.
else. I have this belief that if you can see a, yeah, if you can see a quality in another person, that means that quality has to be within you as well. That possibility has to be within you as well. Um, and I think it starts by that. I think they have to see a possibility. Oftentimes in my life, if I want to learn something, and I see someone else that's kind of like on my level able to do it, then something is ignited within me to say, okay, well, maybe I can do the same thing. And I think that's why all of our stories are very important to share with other people. Even when I share my story, it helps ignite a faith, a belief in others who have something similar that has gone on in their life. And if they see an example of a turnaround, see an example of how their life can be different, then I believe it inspires and sparks something within them
Yeah.
that gives them that same kind of belief. So, you talk about stories. Stories are extremely powerful in helping ignite the
If your
realization of the
old
truth
story
that's
was,
in all of
uh,
us.
yeah, if your
So
old
that's
story
kind of one of
was,
my
you know, something's wrong with me, what would you say the story is that you live today?
yes. They, well, the story is that we are perfect wherever we are on our journey in life. Whatever got us there was supposed to happen, and it's perfect. And we are not in the sense that we have external perfection, but we are born inherently worthy. That would be the new story. We're inherently worthy, no matter what happens to us, whether we're up, whether we're down, whether we have setbacks. That inherent worthiness is always going to be there. It can never be squashed. And if we begin to start from that, then we can begin to move in a positive direction. Because I believe that if we see ourselves as worthy, then that begins to create the possibilities of newness in our life. Because I don't believe you can ever go beyond our own self evaluation, our own self image, our own self worth. And that's why I work a great deal on if you want to get somewhere, the first thing you have to do is recognize your inherent worthiness. And that will be the foundation for you to
Yeah.
get from where you are to where you aspire to be. Because I've seen people who have done great, who have great talent, but they don't feel value. They don't value
Yeah.
themselves. They don't see the worthiness in themselves. And so what'll happen, either they won't get there, or if they do get there, it'll collapse. Kind of like in my life, I was had some modicum of skills and intelligence, but if you don't see yourself as
So
worthy,
you're a
it will not
foundation builder.
sustain itself, and you could end up losing where you've gone. I would say yes. Well, when people come to me, I mean, there's a lot of approaches that you take. I think you have to start out, how you see yourself is I think a foundational piece of it all. And then there's all kinds of tools that you may need to use to help you get there. Sometimes you need to forgive just yourself, like me, of the things I thought I did badly in my life, or maybe what I've done towards someone else, or where I messed up, or opportunities I didn't take, and we end up feeling bad about those things. I said, you can let that go and start with a clean slate, and that clean slate is a
Hmm.
foundation that says, hey, you're okay, you're all worthy, and you can begin anew at any time, no matter what stage of life
Yeah.
you may be in or what conditions you may be facing. And so it's getting that kind of mindset, because one of the things that we often do is we use a lot of negative self-talk about ourselves. Once we get into a spiral that there's something wrong with me, all we'll do is find stuff to reaffirm there's something wrong with us, as opposed to saying, hey, there's something right with me, and look for the things that affirm that and move in that direction. In how we talk to ourselves, what the thoughts that we have about ourselves, about other people for that matter, makes a huge difference for us. I would even say that even when I said never even think bad about another person, because they get the carbon copy, we keep the original, because we're keeping that energy within ourselves. So a lot has to do with that kind of
I'm
mindset and
curious.
how we can turn that around.
You, you may or may not put yourself in this camp, but as I look at you and research you and everything you've done, I would put you in the high achiever camp. Um, and most of the people I work with are high achievers. Uh, you talked about that drive to prove yourself, and when that's built on a wound, that's like, someday I'll prove that I'm not that thing that I say that I am. It goes and crumbles. I'm curious, how has your
Yeah.
relationship to drive or achieving or doing changed as you've centered in your worthiness?
hmm Well, I think for me, it has to be tied to a higher purpose. How can you redirect that drive for something that is beyond just, say, ego satisfaction or self satisfaction? Are you contributing or moving towards something that's bigger than yourself? Uh, One of the reasons I do the work is hopefully inspire people to be their best selves, unleash their best selves, so that we can collectively start creating, a world
Yeah.
that works for all of us. Um, because I think that's what heaven on earth is, among other things, is that you know someone said, and I like this phrase, that we do better
Right.
when we all do better. If everyone does better, it helps everybody. And so uh, the idea then that we are part of a of interrelated or interconnected world, and if we are making a positive contribution to any part of it, then we are also lifted up. And I think that's what Dr. Martin Luther King talked about, the interrelated nature of reality. He said that I cannot be who all that I can be unless you are all that you can be, and you cannot be all that you can be unless I'm being all that I can be, and that is a connection that we all have, and so it's about making a contribution. So using the drive for something that maybe lasts beyond your own lifetime. but it's about a bigger
Well,
purpose. And so if you can convert that to something
let's
positive, then
talk a
it's
little bit
useful.
about your career inside of Unity. And I wanna see what transferable things you've learned for other change agents in the world. Um, so
Hmm.
you went down the path in Unity. You ended up becoming pastor of Unity on the Bay in 1994. Is that right? All right.
That's correct. Yes, I was a member of that community from the mid '80s, late '80s, I think it was, for about before I left and go went to
Okay.
ministerial school in Unity Village. Now, here's the thing. I think I may have mentioned it. I had no desire to be a minister or a spiritual teacher at all. When I did get kind of hooked on it, I said, well, this is good for me. It helped me turn my life around. I can get back into being what I need to be in the world. And I had one of those mystical moments because the leader at that time said later on, I didn't know this. He said, I saw you in this position as a minister at some point, but I never mentioned it to you. I figured you'd have to come to it on your own. And during the time I was there, this vision came up. Oh, you should be a minister, and I resisted it. I resisted it every single day for over a year. It would come up in my mind, and I would say no. It would come in my mind, and say no. And one day I said, "Oh hell no! I'm never going to do anything like this." But I was with a friend at because I said no, I'm too cool for this. I could never see myself being a minister from what I had in my own mind. But I was with a friend and we went to I think they called something a youth fair where they had like different rides and roller coasters, and we were chaperoning some kids and they were on the ride, and I was just standing there kind of in a state of maybe surrender of just or vulnerability. And something struck me in that moment. I saw myself in that position, and as becoming a minister, and it seemed like an electrical current went through my whole body. And in that moment, I said yes. I had no idea how I was going to do it, but things began to unfold almost perfectly. So, after preparing, I ended up going to Unity Village where they have the program. I was there for 2 years. It was one of the best 2 years of my life because I had a chance to immerse myself in continuing my own personal growth and development, which was really a continuation of being in that drug rehab center, which I was there for 6 months. And all I did was work on me, become more aware of me. And I had never done that before in my life. I was always looking outside of me, trying to manipulate things to feel okay.
Yeah.
And I realized after a while,
Yeah.
it had nothing to do with anything out there.
I love
It
that
had
you
something
share
to do
that
within
lightning bolt
me.
moment.
So
Yeah.
anyway, I don't remember the original question. But anyway, I ended up going to Unity Village. I came back and I was there for about 12. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I followed that instinct. And I almost got kicked in the keister, really, so to speak, in that direction. And I came back, and the minister that was there about to retire stayed there he stayed there for another couple of years or more, and we had a really wonderful community grow and develop. And I think one of the things that I most enjoy, what really kind of calls me about the work, is when individuals maybe have their own light bulb moment. They may be stuck in life. They may figure out that there's no way forward, that, my life is over. I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know what my purpose is. And then they have this instinct moment where they realize, hey, I don't have to continue this path. I can actually go a different direction. And we had all kinds of people there. South Florida is a very diverse community, and as in many ways, not only racially, ethnically, but economically. So you may have someone who had lived on one of those islands in multi-million-dollar homes, coming out of, with sitting next to somebody who just came out of a drug rehab center or a homeless shelter, but everybody's there seeking to find that inner truth that is within all of them. And that was one of the great experiences that I think I had, just to have folks who were on that path, because I think we need more of that if we're going to bridge the polarizations and the divides that we see in our world today, that there's a commonality that we all can
What have
aspire
you
to express.
learned about what have you learned about bridging that divide?
But anyway, I was there for about 12
inside
years.
of that work, and how do you see it translate to the rest of our world right now?
Well, I think one of the things that, in helping creating this world and society that works for everyone, we have to recognize at bottom, we're all the same. I mean, we have different experiences and different backgrounds, but the essence of who we are is identical. We have different names they call this divine nature that we have. And we are all interconnected on that soul level, that we cannot see, and that we have more in common than we have differences. And so part of it is recognizing that first within ourselves, and then recognizing that within other people. And then how is it that we can have, I would say, positive conversations that help us rise above what appear to be differences. And oftentimes, if we have really what I call constructive or evolving conversations, you're not trying to convince somebody else that you're right and they're wrong. You're really listening to have an understanding, and then maybe the two people will come up with a new idea that neither of them came up with before, that will bridge that commonality. A lot has to, I think, when people begin to know each other on a deeper level, the seeming differences disappear, because we don't see them as other. We don't see them as an opposition, but we begin to see them as a fellow human being on the path. And then we realize that the differences that we have are mostly made up, and they probably don't matter.
You said something I think is
so. It's a
you
process.
said something I think is
I have to
instrumental,
remain
which
hopeful.
is so often we
No, go ahead.
can't see another way forward. We have our myopic viewpoints, and it's this or that, and it's maybe neither one is great.
Yeah.
But there's something that happens or can happen in relationship where, like, oh, there's another path that neither one of us saw before. And like, I think if there's anything we're called to do as change agents in the world, is hopefully help illuminate another way, right? Hey, there's a path we weren't looking at, that maybe you didn't see, that maybe none of us knew existed until we came together. I want to speak to something here, which is that you grew the congregation from 94 to 2005, from 125 people to about 1,300 people, with revenues, with the support from your community, going from 200,000 in 94 to almost 1.9 million in 2005, and then becoming CEO of Unity Worldwide. I am curious. Like, you grew that congregation, and then you went into Unity Worldwide to be the CEO there and shepherd the whole community forward. What have you learned about growing communities, especially spiritual communities, that maybe is transferable outside of a church setting for any change agent, paradigm changer who is building community around their work?
Yeah, that's a very good question. There's several things that I learned from my experience, and it's always a learning experience, because there's always obstacles that you run into that you have to be able to negotiate around or above. But I think one of the most important things is that you have to have a compelling vision that folks buy into, that benefits not only the collective
That's so
community, but
key.
also benefits them individually. Part of it was that I was, when being at, yeah, I think the vision is key. It's not new to me, but as Stephen Covey always talked about in his book, you begin with the end in mind. You have to have something that stirs the soul, that stirs the cells of your being, that you want to be part of, that will serve as an attractor for others to be part of. So, and also the ones who are involved have to bring a certain authenticity of who they are that aligns with that. There can't be an incongruity between what you're aspiring to be and how you're showing up. You got to be it even before it shows up in the material world. And I think part of my experience that I had in my life is that I brought that kind of authenticity. I believed in this stuff. And I started to translate that into what the organization could be. So that was part of it. But the other part, as equally important, maybe even more important, that translates to any organization I've been a part of, you must have great people around you. And you must bring people around you that have skill sets that you do not have, that have passions in areas that you don't like, that they are passionate about, that they are part of the solution. And you don't come in like you know everything, but rather collectively we know a lot. Individually, we probably don't. There's a ceiling that we can know. And so I think if I were to say anything, attracting great people that are in alignment with where you want to go, that complement each other, so that the whole is far powerful than individual parts adding up. And I had a great staff of people, a great staff of volunteers, great people who were in music, and people who were great with numbers, and it all came together to focus on the common goal. So I would say the quality of the people. I mean, I read something years ago. Well, not too many, far years ago. I think Apple, or no, it was Google. They did a study, and they were trying to find out why certain teams were better than others. What was the ideal team? What was the perfect team? Because they always outperformed other teams. And part of it is that they had a diversity of opinions, but they also created an environment where everyone felt comfortable making their contribution. Nobody was shut out. And that was the kind of environment we sought to put together, where everyone's voice had value, because we all have something to contribute. And if we recognize that, we realize that sometimes it's not the person who's the head of the organization that knows it. It may be someone who's at, for lack of a better term, they're just kind of like, on the ground floor, but they're interacting with what the real world stuff is going on, and their information is probably more important than the person who's sitting up on the desk trying to figure out how to do it. So their voice is important. So to be able to get a variety of voices involved that help move the organization forward, I think is a valuable
love
tool to
that.
have.
And I'm just imagining, for people who don't have a traditional organization, but maybe have an audience for their work, that there might still be a way to get a variety of voices into your community and into your work, and contributing to your understanding of what they need and how you can show up in support of them and what you can learn from them. So good. So, okay. So then you go into being CEO of Unity Worldwide.
Yes.
One of my big questions about this is, so I see life in kind of
Yes.
maybe three phases, if you will. Phase one, you come in, you experience your wounding, you develop your personality. Phase 2, you go trying to prove yourself to fill that void. Phase 3, and we could probably break these up into many more phases, but phase 3, you answer the call, and lo and behold, all the
Mm.
skills you learn trying to push and prove yourself end up being needed in new ways you wouldn't have expected. So you were an attorney, right? You went to Princeton. You got a law degree. You practiced law. I'm curious how that showed up in you being a leader later in life in ways that maybe you would have never thought.
Well, there are certain skill sets that you're right. I think nothing in life is wasted if you are on a path that's yours to express. So I think everything I've accumulated in my life, my personal experience was very important in order to have an understanding of people and what they may be going through, and have as minimal judgment. I don't think anyone's completely non-judgmental, but you have a way of accepting people where they are, because you have to accept yourself. Because I went through a lot of stuff and I did a lot of crazy things that I'm not proud of as I look back over those experiences, and I was able to move further. So I think those things help. And then working in a corporation, right after I was in school, out of college, just for a year, and just observing, someone who has been like in my area, which was advertising at the time. I was working as one of my jobs, and I used to observe one guy, and he used to, we used to do retail advertising before all the internet, and we go to different stores and get ads and things of that nature. And for me, my schedule would be so chaotic. But then I watched one guy who seemed to have everything under control. And what I realized what he did, he would tell his folks or his clients, here are the days and the times that you can reach me at any time. Now, the other times I won't be available, but he organized his time in a way that he didn't have the chaos that some of the other individuals have, and I observed that,
Yeah.
and that was helpful. It is something I just picked up on, and unconsciously, and I still try to use it. I'm not as good as he was, but I'm better than I would have been if I didn't know about that. So I pick up that. You pick up the skill as a speaker and a critical thinker, as a lawyer, and the laws and everything. So if something legal came up, I was never intimidated by it. I could either figure it out or call somebody to figure it out. So you know, and just the ability to enroll or persuade people in a vision is
Yeah.
important. So like it all kind of comes together in a way that I never would have imagined. Because, like I said, if I had listed 1,000 professions or jobs,
Yeah. Yeah.
being a
I
minister would
love
not
you
have been
sharing that,
even on the
because
list.
some of the things we
So
like, oh, okay, law
that's how
shows
it
up
showed
in
up.
a church as well. Sure, that's the obvious stuff, but the less obvious stuff, like, oh, I had to be persuasive. I do enroll people into things as an attorney. And guess what? As a minister, right? Same thing. So I love that phrase. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted. Um, what was your what was like the driving force for you
Yeah,
in growing
yeah, yeah.
Unity on the Bay, and on your work as CEO for Unity Worldwide? Like, what was the why behind it for you? What was the driving vision, the driving force for you? What do you feel like guided you the most?
Well, being the senior minister of Unity of Bay and CEO of Unity World Ministry, they're really two distinct type of jobs. But going back to my work at Unity on the Bay, I I just enjoyed. Number one, I really enjoyed it. So first of all, I just loved what I was doing. I would say that like more than any job I had. Probably 90% of what I did I enjoyed. There was always a 10% that I didn't like to do, but you had that comes along with the territory. The second thing that I think always drove me is that, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is that I love to see when someone has the light bulb go off in them, so their life turns around. If I get it, because some folks would say they were in a class, maybe not even my class, or they were in a service, or they heard me say something, or they thought they heard me say something that I never said that made a difference in their life. Or you see someone who's taking these principles and they've gone from zero to hero in whatever area that they're doing, whatever they're doing in the world. That gave me juice, that kept me going. And my goal then, as a Unity Worldwide Ministries CEO, then you're dealing with the organizations, hopefully to create more of those, or more effective organizations like that on a bigger scale. So it's a different approach, because you don't have that personal one-on-one with a congregation every week. You are it's more corporate, I should say. For lack of use a spiritual perspective, but it's more of an organizational thing. So I had to. It's a whole different skill set that you have to bring.
I want
That
to
I
look.
grew a lot from that experience.
Yeah.
So
No,
it's all
I
about
get it. I
making a
get it.
difference
And
and
it's so clear
transforming
to me
lives.
that you see this light bulb moment, and you've seen it, and you've seen it, and you've seen it, and you've seen it, and that is front and center for you. Um, so like I can get inside of that driving force for you, even if it's at a worldwide scale and you aren't directly touching it. Um, One of the things that our mutual friend Legrand said is your credo, which is, we are not here to casually observe the unfolding of history. We're here to consciously participate in its revelation. Our world is remade, reformed, and transformed by the cutting edge ideas we are in conversation about on a
Yes.
daily basis. So I want to use this last little bit to talk about where we're at in our world right now and your perspective on that.
Ooh,
As
yeah.
I look at it, chaos theory says that stable systems don't
Yeah.
change readily. But systems in chaos, right, they're much easier to push one way or another. They're much easier to change. So
Mhm.
I look at our world right now, and while on some substantial
Mhm.
levels I can't make sense of it, and another kind of in my bones way, I'm excited by it, strangely. That, like, oh, there's so much potential here. There's stuff breaking apart and
Yeah.
making room for the new. Like, how have you made sense over the last few years, and what's your perspective on where we're at?
Oh, you bring up a really great question to consider, because I have been contemplating this. I think as things at least apparently seem to be more chaotic than normal. I don't know if they are because of the internet. It's just amplified everything. But I've been thinking about this because I'm actually running in my mind a book to write on that very topic. And there's a line in a classic new Unity text called "Lessons in Truth." It was written in late 1800s, early 1900s, and there's a chapter in there on what they call chemicalization. And basically, the chemicalization says that whenever you move from one state to a different state, or for a higher state or an evolved state, there's a time where everything gets chaotic. Everything gets disrupted. Old systems begin to break down so that something new can emerge. So, like you were saying, what gives me hope, and the only way that I can look at this, is that we are going through a chemicalization process. And I think anytime there is some evolution, there's this there's sometimes appears to be violence, not maybe real violence, but it may be a violent feeling. It is a chaotic feeling. There's and that's just the way of nature, because usually growth involves some pain short term. If you go to the gym after being there for a long time, you lift some weights, if you feel some pain, that means it's working. You may not like it, but that's what you need to do to get to the next level of, your physical fitness. And so I think we're moving to another level of spiritual fitness, psychological fitness, social fitness, and it looks messy right now. And I think if we have enough people who are holding the high watch of what's possible, then it eventually will fall into place. The thing about it, I don't think it happens for human beings automatically. I think we have to contribute it through holding the high possibilities, through the language that we use, because our language, as you say, creates our world. And we need to be careful what we are speaking, because we are creating it. And our actions that back up our words are helping create that. So we can co-create it, but it doesn't happen on the wheels of inevitability. We have to have enough conscious people who recognize the possibilities and to move in that direction, and to speak into those possibilities, to act in that direction of those possibilities, to bring it about, to midwife or usher in this new paradigm that I think is seeking to be birthed
When
right now.
you
So
are
that's
in
the
your
only way
prayer
that I
time,
can
when you're
remain
in quiet
optimistic.
time, when you're in conversation with the divine, I'm curious what messages you're getting right now, either about our world or about your next step or your participation in this unfolding. Like, I don't know why I'm asking this of you exactly, but I'm well, because I'm told to. So I'm curious. I'm curious what you might say about that.
Well, usually, like sometimes I may bring an agenda to prayer. I may have a question I want answered, or I just want to turn it over to the all-knowing presence, and then it may reveal itself. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But
Mm,
most of the time, I just kind of just want to be. Just I'm a fairly accomplished practitioner of mindfulness meditation, and the whole idea is just to be fully present to what's going on. And then oftentimes, some ideas will come to me uh, when I'm in that state, when I'm kind of reducing the chaos of my mind to get into pure being, so to speak. And I think for me as an individual, what comes up is that, James, you're still thinking too small. you know and part of my thing that comes out, every morning I'll write something down and say, what message do I want to carry with me today? And lately it's become spirit is saying, aim high, think big,
amen.
act bold,
Amen.
and adapt as needed. So I have, yeah, so I have to keep watching my. And so one of the things that I realize that I have to be aware of is be conscious of what I'm thinking, be conscious of what I'm speaking, because it's a reflection
Yeah.
of what my experiences will be. And oftentimes I find myself thinking, I fall, we all, at least for me, I say I still fall back into, oh, I can only achieve or do so much, you know, that's beyond me. And I'm putting a limitation on the presence, or what I like to call the force. The force is unlimited, but I'm putting a limitation on it because I'm limiting me within that. So that's what kind of comes up for me as an individual thing that says there's more in you Because I'm getting up there now. I'm not the youngster I used to be, but I follow a statement that came from my wife's grandmother, who used to get up, 4 o'clock in the morning and cook food for everybody in the house. And she said, I am going to
Ah,
wear out. I am not going to rust out. She's always going to continue doing something to make a contribution in her life. And I think, that's what we're here to do, is that we've been given gifts, and, we've given so much, and we have to do as much as we can to take advantage of that, because the life is precious. I happen to believe that there's probably a whole bunch of spirits and souls trying to get in these bodies, and there's only so many, and we need to take full advantage of it while we're here. So I think for me is to say, James, there's always more in you to be expressed. And then, how is it that you can help others, have that same viewpoint and make a contribution? Because like I said, I'm here to help people unleash the highest within themselves. And then they go into all the different places in our world. They may be in their family, how they bring their best self, and it ignites that in others. It may be in their school, it may be in their organization, it may be, hopefully, in politics, where people bring, the higher way of being. Because how the change is going to happen is not, we can't say, oh, those people over there, they need to do something different. No, we are those people. We have to weave ourselves into those institutions so it reflects what is it that we want to see.
I love it.
So I think that's the bigger idea, and any contribution I can make
Awesome. Awesome.
on
Awesome.
that,
Yeah, my
will
guidance
make
is
a difference.
that's a mantra for my guidance to me as well. You're putting too many limitations on this, Jeffrey. Too many limitations. Open it up. Open the aperture. So good. Reverend Trapp, how
Yeah,
can we find out more about you?
yeah,
Where can we send people?
absolutely. Well, like I said, I'm at a spiritual community now, because after I finished up my tenure as CEO, I moved to California. So I'm at a place called Spiritual Life Center. So if you ever want to find out what's happening there, or get our services on YouTube, just go to slcworld.org. That's their website. I have my own personal website, jamestrapp.com, and you can get on, my email list to get, my blogs, and uh, there's also a link that you can go to. I have this thing, because I remember I said in the beginning that one of the things that's so important is our own self-worth, and I created what I call your self-worth quiz to see where you are on the scale of self-worth. And then if you'd like, there's some additional there's an online course. You can even call me to have a free consultation, and I can engage in as a personal consultant for individuals. So I think between SLC World, jamestrap.com, and I think
All
there's a
good.
longer
We'll
URL for the test, but
we'll put it in the
you can
show
go on the
notes.
website. I think it'll
Hey,
take you there.
I just want to thank you for sharing. You've lived such a rich life. Oh, what's the book? Tell us
Yeah,
about the
and
book.
also my book is available. The book is called "Take Back Your Future: How to Get Unstuck and Create the Life You Want, Love, and Deserve." So it's available on Amazon or Barnes and
Awesome.
Noble, or you can go to my website and get it as well. And it's really about, it's really tells, in story form, kind of my journey and the principles that I used in my life, beginning with how I overcame the abandonment, changing my self image, setting my own vision and purpose, some of the daily routines I engage in, the idea of creating a legacy, for your life. So when you move on, that you've made a positive contribution. So it's a short book, easy to read, but hopefully there'll be a few things you can use if you're feeling stuck and you
Awesome.
want to create
Beautiful.
something new in your
We
life.
will link to all of that in the show notes. I want to thank you for being well, first of all, just for being generous with your time and your spirit, I also want to thank you for being such an example of using your story, of owning your story and using your story. It is, I think, one of the most powerful tools of liberation we have. And you're just such a great example of it. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your spirit, your story, your time. It's been really, really great and a pleasure.
Well, it's been a pleasure for me. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed your questions and just being on your podcast. So thank you so much. It was enjoyable for me as well.
Until next time, my friends, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this conversation and part of this community. All my best. We'll see you in the next show. Hey there, thanks so much for listening in. If this conversation was powerful, if it stirred your soul or inspired your journey, then be sure to share it with a friend. Just copy and paste the link wherever you're listening to this podcast and text that link right now to a friend that you think would be inspired by this episode. And if this is your first time here, be sure to click that subscribe button over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and I'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and review so I can get to know you and your thoughts better. To learn more about the work I do with emerging and established paradigm changers, go to thecourageousmessenger.com. That's all for today. Thanks so much for being here, and I hope to see you in the next episode.